It's time to make a smoking bowl. Hi, I'm Kent and welcome to Turn a Wood Bowl. Today we're going to make a smoking bowl. That's right, it's otherwise known as an ashtray. This is designed for cigar smoke, so it's going to have cigar rest on it. So we got a lot of details and things we're going to do it a little bit different than we normally do around here. This is not going to be your average bowl. We've got a couple extra steps in this process. It's pretty fun. You don't have to be a cigar smoker to appreciate this turning, and you might learn some new techniques that can be applied to different projects. So I'm going to go over to the bandsaw and start getting this blank ready for our turning.
Now, I don't want to make this circle or a square, so I'm actually going to go over to the computer and I'm going to lay something out here real quick. I'm starting with a square, but I'm going to have the center portions curve out a bit. So it's going to be square-like, but it's going to be in a regular shape. Now, I've got the template for this in the description below. You can download this if you'd like, and you can borrow this or you can make your own. The point is I'm not going to be turning a circle or a square, so we're going to do something a little bit different with this turning, which is kind of neat, and it's going to offer some new challenges, but we're going to see some different results as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to print this out, and I'm going to spray mount this to the blank itself. I'm using just a simple 3M spray adhesive, and then I'm going to take my time and trim this out on the bandsaw. I'm cutting a little wide of the line at the moment just to make sure that I've got extra space there and I'm not sneaking up right up on the line. Just take your time and go nice and slow. It helps that you have a relatively flat blank as well. Remember to keep your fingers away from that blade. I know it's pretty obvious, but you start concentrating on keeping lines really close, it's easy to forget where your hands are. Just imagine that 4-inch safety circle around the blade. Try never to put your hands within that 4-inch circle. I've got a video all about bandsaw safety. You might want to check that out. So I'm just taking my time here and just going nice and slow and working this through. Now, I've got a relatively coarse blade on the saw right now. I could have taken this down to a finer tooth blade and maybe gotten a little bit cleaner cut, but this is going to work out. You'll see how we deal with that as we proceed. Okay, so here's our irregular shaped blank. It's looking pretty good. Now there's a center point on that template, and that's really critical because we need to make sure we're lined up on that center point. And the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take a bit of time and get the face of this as straight up and down as possible, and that's looking pretty good. I'm going to clean up the bottom of this blank. This is my 5/8 inch 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge. I usually use the 5/8 inch gouge for roughing and removing material like you're seeing here. And then I'll step down to the 1/2 inch gouge to do more finer detail. Now I'm going to mark where the tenon will be placed on the bottom of this. And I'll work some push cuts into that scribed mark that I just created. That will become the tenon for this turning. You want to take your time and just let the tool glide across the tool rest, shifting your body weight with it. Remember, we're not using our hands or our arms to move the gouge at all. We actually have the gouge locked up against our body, and our entire body is shifting at the knees, just shifting our body weight forward with each pass. Okay, so we have the tenon and the shoulder shaped. I'm going to go ahead and make the dovetail on the tenon, and this is my spindle detail gouge. You can see it has a longer point, and that helps me get down into that deeper angle to create that dovetailed angle that the tenon or the 4-jaw chuck will grab onto. Okay, so I'm going to turn around now and start shaping the exterior of the bottom of this bowl. You can see how the gouge is locked up against my body, and I'm shifting my body weight from right to left. I'm just going to take your time and make nice pushing cuts. You can see how the flute is angled towards the direction of the cut. And you want to slow down when you get out to those corners because there's less material that's being cut. The tool will start moving much quicker. And the problem with that is that you're going to skip over areas on those corners. So you want to maintain your pace across the tool rest, even though you get to the area where there's less resistance with those outer corners. And then I can turn around and do a push cut here, but then I can blend that bottom area in with a shear scrape. You can see how the handle is dropped down and the tool's at about a 45 degree angle here. You just take your time here and use this shear scrape to just do a light shaving cut to really get a nice smooth surface on that exterior. Okay, so I'm going to install this platform. Now I made this platform in a previous video, and that was all about making a free sanding station. You might want to check that video out. It's actually pretty fun. But I'm going to use this for a different purpose. I'm going to use this platform to mount and to hold my drill. So what we're going to do is we're going to make some rests for the ashtray. These will be cigar rests. And I'm going to lock down my index guide on the lathe. And I'm going to drill out each one. Now these are 90 degrees away from each other. The drill needs to be going in at 90 degrees. You can eyeball it, but unfortunately it's really hard to eyeball. If I were to make several of these, I would most likely make a jig. Now my index wheel has 48 spots on it. So I've got 4 corners to drill out. So essentially I need to unlock this and move it 12 spots. So all the index wheels are slightly different. So you're going to need to figure out how many spaces you need to move to get your position for each of these. And like I was saying, if I were to make a bunch of these, I would make a jig here, assured that this drill is going in at a 90 degree angle, because even if it's off just a little bit, it becomes obvious when we continue turning here, as you will see. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get this mounted on the 4-jaw chuck. It's a fun project. Now, of course, this is an ashtray, but imagine drilling holes in the side of a bowl. Well, number one, why would you do that? Number two, why not do it? Number three, you can potentially come up with some interesting results. So it's something to think about. It might be something you consider incorporating into a turning. Now, I've drilled out other bowls and done little tricks with it. If you've seen the video where I insert a nut in the side of a bowl, that one's kind of fun. This is a similar project. I'm just, again, using the larger gouge. This is my 5/8 inch gouge, and this is used to get material out of the way. I'm not really trying to make nice, clean finishing cuts at this point. I'm just getting down to the area that I need to be. You can see it kind of skip around there when I'm cutting those corners. You really want to hold down pressure onto the tool rest so that it goes into those cuts. You can see the little slots now. We've got to decide how far we want to get down. Now, I'm also shaping the rim of this bowl right now. Now, I want the rim to be angled down towards the bowl. This will have a relatively wide rim on it. And for obvious reasons, if there's any ash or anything that's up on that rim, we want it to fall down into the bowl. So I will have this rim sloped downward into the bowl area. I'm going to go ahead and remove this material. We don't need that. Now this is a little different than most of my turnings. Most of my turnings, I'm working from the sidewall down. This is a pretty big chunk of wood. I don't really have to worry about the walls moving or anything. So basically just going to get material out of the way as I need. There you can see the slots. And I've switched over to my 1/2" gouge so that I can refine that edge, or which will be the rim of the bowl, and just make really nice, clean finishing passes here to get down to that surface. You can see how light and thin that cut is. You want to make those cuts really, really thin. And again, we'll get this material out of the way. You see the angle of the flute? This is about a 45-degree angle to the cut right there. Okay, so we've got our slots. I'm going to go ahead and mark a circle that will end in each one of those slots. You can see that slot on top, how it's off, and it doesn't have to be off much, but it becomes very obvious once you see that compared to the angle and the direction of the other slots. So I'm a little disappointed in that, but all in all, this is kind of a fun experiment. It's good to get out there and do some turnings that you're pushing yourself and you're trying some different things and just having some fun learning new techniques. And you never know, the nice thing about developing new techniques is you start thinking of different things, or you start thinking of turning in a different way. You start thinking, wait a minute, what if I did this with my next turning? What if I added or incorporated something that I just learned from this in my next turning? And that's where doing experimental turnings like this is really valuable. So I'm scooping this, and from what I've learned from a cigar connoisseur is that you really want to drag the tip of the cigar with the ashes on it across the edge of the ashtray to pull the ashes off. You don't want to flick the cigar, kind of like, I guess, like you see people flicking cigarettes. It doesn't work like that, apparently. So what you want is you want an ashtray that has a relatively sharp edge on the bowl. So in order to get that sharp edge, I'm going to use my round nose scraper. This is a carbide scraper, and yes, I do use carbide scrapers occasionally. And the reason I'm using this is that curved edge will be able to get under that rim and help create a relatively sharp edge for scraping the tip of the cigar off. I'm just taking my time, I'm trying to make as light of passes as possible. Now, unfortunately, this wood is a little bit softer and it is pulling out the end grain. It is a very noticeable difference between the gouge and the carbide scraper, but that curved round head gets underneath there very nicely. So I'm going to go ahead and sand this up. You want to be really light with the sanding pad with all of those open areas if you have the lathe running. The back isn't quite as bad, but with those open slots, it can catch very easily, so you want to be very light with that. Now I still need to sand those outer curved edges, and I'll show you how I'm going to deal with that in just a second. But first we're going to remove the foot, or remove the tenon and shape the foot of the bowl. So I'm putting on my jam chuck, and I've got a piece of foam packing material that I'm using there to pad between the bowl and the 4-jaw chuck, or the jam chuck rather. So I'm going to use push cuts into the headstock, so I've got good support here. And I'm going to take the area down that we don't need, and to blend that in, I'm going to use the shear scrape again, just on the tip of the 1/2" bowl gouge here. I'm using just that lower blade, and I'm shaving down that area to blend it in with the rest of the exterior. That's looking really good. So now I'm going to go ahead and shape the foot. And I want the foot to be concave so it doesn't rock or wobble. So I'm going to take material out of the center of the foot. Now this piece of wood is relatively dry, so I'm not concerned about warping. It will probably distort some, but it'll probably won't even be noticeable. I'm going to switch over to my spindle detail gouge so that I can get in there and really work this nub down. Now, if you're not comfortable doing this, you can stop right here and either whittle off that little nub or you can sand it down. It'll take a little while, but you can sand that down. What I like to do is I like to get underneath there with the spindle detail gouge, make the nub as narrow as possible, and then I will apply forward pressure and turn the lathe off and add a little extra pressure, and it'll sever that nub right off. And then you can sand it smooth. And the way I'm going to deal with those is I'm going to take them over to my belt sander. And I'm just going to rock these back and forth to smooth them out. It doesn't take much to blend these in and make them nice and smooth. All right, so I'm going to apply tried and true Danish oil to this. Now, I know a question I'm probably going to get is, won't the tray just burn because it's wood? And it'll probably get some burn marks on the bottom, but the ash typically isn't that hot to cause a problem. It'll get dirty inside that bowl, but it shouldn't ignite, hopefully. You do want to make sure all of this oil finish is completely cured, which I believe with tried and true is 72 hours minimum, because it will ignite right now with the fresh oil on it. So I'm going to take my time and get that finish all throughout, and then I'll get this all wrapped up. And all in all, I think this turned out really, really nice. I'm quite happy with it. And now the other thing too is it's got a bit of weight to it, and that's for obvious reasons, because you want it to be stable sitting on a table. I'm pretty happy with this piece. A lot of different techniques used to create this.
So here it is, a cigar ashtray. Now, is it perfect? No, and that's totally fine. This was more of an experiment to see how this would turn out. One of the things we learned from this is we really want to take our time and make those holes 90 degrees to the headstock. They're off a little bit, it's going to be pretty obvious. So all in all, it's pretty cool. This is a fun problem-solving project to do. We also started with an irregular shape, which is kind of fun too. Creates these different shapes on the side of the turning, which is pretty awesome. The whole point of this exercise is to get out of your comfort zone and do something a little bit different and experiment, and that's exactly what we did here. I think this turned out pretty good. Now I'll have to find somebody that smokes cigars and see what they think about this and maybe give this to them as a gift. Now, if I were to do a bunch of these, say as gifts, for instance, I would definitely create some sort of jig so I was getting those angles just right. It's also important to remember to use your index scroll on your lathe to make sure you get those locations set up properly for each of the corners as well. So we learned a lot of different things with this project, and I hope you found it interesting, and maybe you'll apply some of the things that you learned in this video to a turning that you're doing. It might not be an ashtray, but it could be something completely different. If you plan on incorporating something that you learned from this video, do me a favor and leave me a comment below and tell me about it. I'd greatly appreciate that. And while you're down there, click that like button. Thank you. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching. Be sure to check out my website, turnawoodbowl.com. Over there, I've got everything you need to learn about, yep, you got it, turning wood bowls. Just check it out, turnawoodbowl.com. All right, guys, as always, until next time, thank you so much for watching, and happy turning.